The emergency klaxons blared through the research vessel as Finn Thorne frantically worked the controls, fighting against the planet's fierce gravitational pull. The ship's hull creaked ominously as it plunged through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, his knuckles white against the control stick. The lush purple landscape below rushed up to meet him with frightening speed. At the last moment, he managed to level out enough to turn what would have been a fatal crash into merely a catastrophic one. The impact threw him against his restraints as the ship carved a deep furrow through the alien soil. When the vessel finally skidded to a stop, Finn hung limply in his seat, taking stock of his injuries. Bruised but alive. The same couldn't be said for his ship. "Well, this is just perfect," he sighed, unstrapping himself and gathering his emergency gear. The planet wasn't exactly friendly to human life, the atmospheric composition was barely within tolerable limits, and the gravity was about 1.2 times Earth normal. He'd have to find shelter soon. As Finn emerged from the wreckage, he failed to notice the enormous figure watching him from the shadow of the towering crystal formations that dotted the landscape. Rala observed the tiny creature with fascination, her luminescent eyes taking in every detail of his strange form and movements. At 14 feet tall, with iridescent scaled skin that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue, Rala was considered a genetic aberration even among her own kind. The Nexari were naturally tall, but she towered over them by several feet. Her size had made her an outcast, driving her to seek solitude in these remote crystal canyons. She watched as the small being set up what appeared to be scanning equipment, methodically taking readings of the surrounding area. His movements were precise, practiced, clearly a scientist or researcher of some kind. Despite his diminutive size, he showed no fear in this alien environment. Finn's scanner chirped, detecting a large mass of crystalline formations nearby that might provide suitable shelter. As he gathered his gear to investigate, a shadow fell over him. He froze, slowly turning around. Rala stood there, her massive form blocking out the system's twin suns. Her crystalline horns caught the light, creating rainbow refractions that danced across the ground. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "Well," Finn said finally, craning his neck to meet her gaze, "you're definitely not in any of our xenobiology databases." To his surprise, she responded in perfect galactic standard, her voice a melodious rumble that he felt in his bones. "And you are very far from any known human settlements, little scientist." Finn blinked. "You know about humans? We Nexari have observed your kind from afar. Though none have ventured this deep into our territory before." She tilted her head, studying him. "You are either very brave or very lost." "A bit of both, actually," Finn admitted with a wry smile. "My ship's research array detected some unusual energy signatures in this sector. I came to investigate, but my engines failed during approach." He gestured to the smoking wreck behind him. "Now I'm stuck here until I can effect repairs." Rala considered this. By Nexari law, she should report any human incursion to the authorities. But she had long since stepped outside those laws by choosing exile. And something about this tiny being intrigued her. "These canyons are dangerous for one of your size," she said finally. "There are predators that would find you an easy meal. My dwelling is nearby. You will be safer there while you plan your repairs." Finn studied her carefully. His survival training screamed at him not to trust an unknown alien entity, especially one that could crush him with a single misstep. But his scientific curiosity and gut instinct told him something different. "Thank you," he said. "I'm Finn, by the way. Finn Thorne. I am Rala." She held out her massive hand, palm up, in what he recognized as an offer of assistance. After only a moment's hesitation, he climbed on. As she carried him through the crystal canyons, Finn couldn't help but notice how carefully she moved, each step placed with deliberate precision despite her enormous size. She was clearly used to navigating a world not built for her scale. They arrived at a vast cave mouth, its walls lined with the same crystalline formations he'd seen throughout the canyon. Inside, Finn was surprised to find an elegant living space, with furniture and tools scaled to Rala's size but arranged with an artist's eye for beauty. "You live here alone?" he asked, noting the solitary nature of the dwelling. Rala's luminescent eyes dimmed slightly. "It is simpler this way." Finn recognized the pain behind those words. He'd heard similar sentiments from other outcasts and wanderers he'd met in his travels. Perhaps they had more in common than their vastly different sizes would suggest. As the system's twin sun set, casting the canyon in deep purple shadows, Finn began setting up his portable research station while Rala prepared some kind of meal. They worked in comfortable silence, two lonely souls who had found something unexpected in this remote corner of the galaxy: understanding. Days turned into weeks as Finn worked to repair his ship, each one bringing him and Rala closer together in unexpected ways. While her massive hands couldn't manage the delicate components of his vessel, she proved invaluable in other ways, lifting heavy sections of hull, reaching high places, and most importantly, sharing her knowledge of the local crystals that could potentially power his systems. One morning, as Finn tinkered with the ship's power core, Rala returned from gathering supplies with something clutched carefully in her enormous hands. "I found something that might interest you," she said, crouching down to his level. She opened her hands to reveal a cluster of crystals that pulsed with an internal light, shifting through colors like an aurora. Finn's eyes widened as his scanner went wild. "These energy readings are incredible. This could be exactly what we need to get the core running again." "They grow deep in the canyon," Rala explained, her luminescent eyes bright with pleasure at his excitement. "My people once used them for power, before we retreated from the stars." Finn looked up from his scanner. "Retreated? What do you mean?" Rala's expression darkened. "It is a long story, and not a pleasant one. Perhaps another time." She stood abruptly, her massive form casting long shadows in the morning light. "I will show you where to find more crystals." As they made their way through the twisting canyons, Finn noticed how other creatures gave them a wide berth. "They fear you," he observed. "As they should," Rala said quietly. "Everything fears what it cannot understand." "I don't fear you," Finn said without thinking. Rala stopped, looking down at him with an unreadable expression. "Then you are either very foolish or very wise." Her tone was light, but there was something beneath it, wonder, perhaps, or longing. They reached a deep cavern where the crystals grew in abundance. As Finn took readings and collected samples, Rala kept watch, her massive form blocking most of the entrance. "Tell me about your world," she said suddenly. "What drives a human to wander so far from home?" Finn continued working as he answered. "Earth? It's crowded. Noisy. Everyone packed together, all wanting the same things, following the same paths. I never quite fit there." He chuckled. "Funny thing is, I fit better out here, millions of light years from home, than I ever did there." "Among the stars," Rala mused, "or among those who understand what it means to be different?" Finn's hands stilled on his equipment. "Both, maybe." That evening, as they sat outside Rala's cave watching the twin suns set, Finn finally asked the question that had been nagging at him. "Why do you live alone out here? Surely there must be others of your kind who would welcome you." Rala was quiet for so long that Finn thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My size is not natural among my people. They believe it represents a dangerous mutation, one that could threaten the purity of our species if passed on." She gestured to her towering form. "They gave me a choice: submit to genetic modification to become normal, or leave their cities forever." "And you chose exile," Finn said softly. "I chose to remain myself," Rala corrected, her luminescent eyes flaring briefly. "Even if it meant being alone." Finn stood up, walking closer to where she sat. Even seated, she towered over him, but he'd long since stopped noticing. "Being true to yourself isn't the same as being alone," he said. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way. Rala looked down at him, her expression softening. And have you found what you were searching for, out among the stars? I thought I was searching for scientific discoveries, new phenomena to study and catalog, Finn admitted. But maybe what I was really looking for was someone who understood what it means to be different. To choose your own path, even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition, understanding, possibility. The moment was broken by a sudden rumbling in the distance. Rala stood, alert. Storm coming, she said. A big one. As they hurried back to the cave, the first drops of glowing rain began to fall, each one leaving small crystalline formations where it landed. Finn watched in fascination as the landscape transformed, becoming even more alien and beautiful. Inside the cave, Rala busied herself securing her belongings while Finn checked his equipment. These storms, he asked, how long do they last? Sometimes days, she replied. The crystals they leave behind are what give these canyons their power. My people believe they are tears from the moons, falling in love with the ground. That's beautiful, Finn said. Scientifically inaccurate, but beautiful. Rala laughed, the sound echoing through the cave like music. Not everything needs to be explained by science, little human. No, Finn agreed, watching as she moved around the cave with surprising grace for her size. Some things just need to be experienced to be understood. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, two outcasts had found something neither had expected, a place where their differences didn't matter, where being unusual made them perfectly suited to understand each other. As the crystalline rain transformed the world outside, something was changing within them as well, growing like the crystals themselves, bright, powerful, and impossible to ignore. The crystal storm lasted 3 days, transforming the canyon into a glittering wonderland. When it finally cleared, Finn and Rala emerged to find their world changed, not just by the crystalline formations that now covered everything, but by the understanding that had grown between them during their enforced isolation. They were collecting crystals scattered by the storm when Rala suddenly froze, her luminescent eyes fixed on the horizon. Someone's coming, she said, her voice tense. My people. In the distance, Finn could make out several tall figures approaching through the canyon. Though they shared Rala's basic form, the iridescent scaled skin, the crystalline horns, they were noticeably smaller, standing perhaps 10 feet tall. Hide, Rala urged, gently pushing him toward a cluster of crystals. They must not find you here. Finn ducked behind the formation just as the group reached them. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate markings on his scales, stepped forward. Rala, he said, his tone formal. You are far from your assigned territory. Elder Varn, Rala replied, bowing slightly. The storm drove me to seek higher ground. And what of the human vessel we detected? Varn asked sharply. Our sensors showed it crash landing in this region. Finn's heart raced. Of course they would have detected his crash, he'd been naive to think otherwise. I saw it, Rala said calmly. The pilot did not survive. I buried the remains, as our customs dictate for all living things. Varn's eyes narrowed. You should have reported this immediately. I am in exile, Elder, Rala reminded him. I have no access to communication systems. Your exile was a choice, Rala, another Nexari spoke up. You could return to us if you simply accepted the modification procedure. A choice between being myself and being accepted is no choice at all, Jen, Rala said quietly. You of all people should understand that. Jen flinched, and Finn noticed something in her expression, not disgust or fear, but sadness, maybe even regret. Enough, Varn declared. We will send a team to recover and destroy the vessel. We cannot risk others finding it and tracing it here. He fixed Rala with a stern look. Stay in your assigned territory from now on. Your exile does not exempt you from our laws. After they left, Finn emerged from hiding. They're going to destroy my ship, he said, running a hand through his hair. All my research, my only way home. No, Rala said firmly. We won't let that happen. She looked down at him, her expression determined. There is something you should see. She led him deeper into the canyon than they'd ever gone before, finally stopping before what appeared to be a solid crystal wall. Rala pressed her hand against it in a specific pattern, and suddenly the wall shimmered and disappeared, revealing a massive cavern beyond. Finn gasped. The space was filled with technology, ships, vehicles, and equipment, all scaled for beings Rala's size. What is this place? A remnant of our past, Rala explained, leading him inside. Before the fear took hold, before we retreated from the stars, my people were explorers. The ones who built these ships were like me, larger than normal, better suited for deep space travel. She ran her hand along the hull of a nearby vessel. When the society changed, when they decided that conformity was safer than diversity, all of this was hidden away and forgotten. But you found it, Finn said in awe. I had centuries of solitude to explore these canyons, Rala said with a slight smile. And perhaps the old ones wanted it to be found, by someone who would understand its value. Finn walked around the cavern, his scientist's mind racing with possibilities. Most of this technology is far advanced from my ship. With the right modifications, using the power crystals. He looked up at Rala. We could get out of here before they destroy my vessel. But... He hesitated. Would you come with me? Rala stared at him, clearly stunned by the suggestion. Leave? But where would we go? Anywhere, Finn said, growing excited. Everywhere. There's so much out there to explore, to discover. And you wouldn't have to hide who you are. He gestured to the ships around them. Your ancestors knew that being different wasn't a weakness, it was an advantage. They built all this because of who they were, not in spite of it. The elders would never allow it, Rala said, but Finn could hear the longing in her voice. The elders aren't the ones living alone in a canyon, he pointed out gently. You chose exile over changing who you are. Maybe it's time to choose something else, not fitting in, not hiding away, but embracing who you are, out there among the stars. Rala was quiet for a long moment, her luminescent eyes reflecting the gleam of the ancient ships. Finally, she looked down at Finn with a new expression, hope. We would need to move quickly, she said. Once they realize your grave is empty, they will return in force. Finn grinned. Then we better get to work. Good thing we've got a genius scientist and a gifted engineer who happen to work really well together. As they began examining the ships, choosing one that could be adapted to their needs, Finn couldn't help but marvel at how things had changed. He'd crashed on this planet thinking he was lost, only to find something he hadn't even known he was looking for. And now, preparing to embark on an even greater adventure, he realized that sometimes the best discoveries weren't the ones you went looking for, but the ones that found you when you least expected them. The real question was, could they complete their preparations before the Nexari returned? And if they did escape, where would their journey take them? Time was running out. Finn and Rala worked tirelessly to prepare their chosen vessel, a sleek ship that seemed to be designed for long-range exploration. The power crystals from the recent storm proved to be perfect for the ancient engines, their energy signature different enough from modern Nexari technology to hopefully avoid detection. Hand me that coupling, Finn called from inside an access panel. Rala carefully picked up the tiny component between two massive fingers, passing it down to him with surprising delicacy. They had developed an efficient working rhythm over the past few days, each compensating for the other's limitations. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from the security system they'd rigged at the cavern's entrance. Rala straightened, her luminescent eyes narrowing. They're back. Earlier than we expected. Finn emerged from the panel, wiping grease from his hands. How close are we to being ready? The engines are functional, life support is stable, Rala said, running through their checklist. Navigation needs calibration, but She was cut off by the sound of voices echoing through the canyon. Multiple voices. They know, she whispered. They must have found your empty grave. Finn's mind raced. We need more time. Maybe I could create a distraction. No, Rala said firmly. They would kill you on sight. I'll go. I can at least slow them down. Before Finn could protest, she was moving toward the entrance. But she stopped short when a familiar voice called out. Rala. I know you're here. Please, we need to talk. Jen, Rala breathed, recognizing her old friend's voice. Let me come with you, Finn insisted. We're in this together. After a moment's hesitation, Rala nodded. They emerged from the hidden cavern to find Jen standing alone in the canyon. Her eyes widened at the sight of Finn. So it's true, she said. You hid the human. His name is Finn, Rala said. And yes, I helped him. Just as our ancestors would have done. The others are coming, Jen warned. Varn has assembled a security team. They'll be here within the hour. She hesitated, then added, they're bringing containment fields. They mean to take you back by force, Rala. To perform the modification whether you consent or not. Finn stepped forward, despite feeling impossibly small between the two Nexari. They can't do that. It's her choice. Choice. A new voice boomed through the canyon. Elder Varn stepped into view, followed by several armed Nexari. Choice is what led to the corruption of our species. Choice is what nearly destroyed us. You're wrong, Rala said, her voice stronger than Finn had ever heard it. Our ancestors weren't corrupted, they were evolved. They built amazing things, explored the stars. They understood that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. And where did that get them? Varn demanded. War. Chaos. Only by controlling our genetic destiny, by maintaining purity, have we found peace. You haven't found peace, Finn interjected. You found stagnation. You're so afraid of difference that you've stopped growing, stopped exploring, stopped living. Varn's eyes narrowed. You know nothing of our history, human. Restrain them both. The security team moved forward, containment fields humming to life. But before they could act, Jen stepped between them and Rala. No, she said firmly. Rala's right. I've spent years watching her survive out here, staying true to herself despite everything we did to her. She's stronger than any of us, not in spite of her difference, but because of it. You dare defy the Council? Varn's voice was dangerous. The Council defies our own heritage, Jen shot back. Look around you. These canyons are filled with the remnants of who we once were, explorers, innovators, dreamers. We didn't achieve greatness by all being the same. We achieved it by celebrating our differences. More voices joined in, other members of the security team, expressing their own doubts, their own secret yearnings for something more than the restricted life they'd been living. Varn looked around, realizing he was losing control of the situation. This is sedition. I'll have you all. He was cut off by a massive rumbling sound. Everyone looked up to see the hidden hangar door sliding open, revealing the ancient ship, its crystal engines glowing with power. That's our cue, Finn said with a grin. Anyone who wants to remember who the Nexari really are is welcome to join us. To everyone's surprise, Jen was the first to step forward. Others followed, dropping their weapons, moving to stand with Rala. You can't all leave, Varn spluttered. The Council. The Council can adapt, Rala said firmly, or it can stagnate. The choice is theirs. Just as the choice to leave is ours. What followed was chaos, but the organized kind. While Varn raged and threatened, those who had chosen to leave helped prepare the ship. Their knowledge of modern Nexari technology, combined with Finn's expertise and Rala's understanding of the ancient systems, soon had the vessel ready for launch. As they made final preparations, Finn found himself standing with Rala in the ship's massive bridge, designed for crew members her size. "You know," he said, looking up at her with a smile, "when I crashed here, I thought I was lost. Turns out I was just early for the adventure of a lifetime." Rala's luminescent eyes softened as she looked down at him. "Perhaps we were both lost, until we found each other." The ship's engines hummed to life, crystal energy pulsing through ancient conduits. As they prepared for launch, Finn couldn't help but feel that this was more than just an escape, it was a beginning. They weren't just leaving a planet, they were starting a movement, reminding an entire species of who they once were and who they could be again. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, there had to be a place where a too-tall alien and a tiny human could build something new together. The ancient ship soared through space, its crystal engines leaving a trail of rainbow light in their wake. The bridge was a study in contrasts, massive control panels designed for Nexary hands, now fitted with human-sized interfaces that Finn had engineered. It was a perfect metaphor for their journey, two different worlds finding ways to work together. 6 months had passed since their dramatic escape from the canyon. Their small crew of rebel Nexary had grown into something larger, a movement. Word had spread through hidden channels across Nexary space, drawing others who felt constrained by their society's rigid demands for conformity. Rala stood at the main viewport, watching the stars streak by. "Another signal," she announced, her luminescent eyes scanning the data. "A settlement on the outer rim. They're asking to join us." "How many?" Finn asked, working at his modified console. "About 30. Mostly genetic aberrants like me, and their supporters." She smiled slightly. "They're calling us the Star Wanderers." "Better than renegade giants," Finn quipped, earning a chuckle from their bridge crew. Their mission had evolved beyond simple escape. They'd discovered other hidden caches of ancient Nexary technology, built outposts in abandoned star systems, and created spaces where differences weren't just tolerated but celebrated. Humans from frontier worlds had begun seeking them out too, drawn by stories of a place where size and species didn't matter. Signal from the Council, Jen reported from her station. Since joining them, she'd become their chief diplomat. "They're requesting a meeting." Rala and Finn exchanged looks. After months of denouncing them as criminals and threats to Nexary society, this was unexpected. "They're afraid," Jen explained. "Our movement is growing too large to ignore. And some council members have begun questioning the old ways. Perhaps they're ready to remember who they once were," Rala mused. "Or who they could be," Finn added. The meeting was set for neutral territory, an ancient space station they'd restored, its architecture accommodating beings of all sizes. As their ship docked, Finn stood with Rala in the airlock. "Ready?" he asked, looking up at her. She gazed down at him, her expression soft. "With you?" "Always." The council members who entered the station's great hall were not the confident, rigid authorities they'd once been. Months of watching their society's youth and dreamers choose exile had shaken their certainty. "We have been rigid in our thinking," Elder Varn admitted, looking aged and tired. "Our fear of the past led us to forget its lessons." "The past holds wisdom," Rala agreed, "but we're not interested in simply returning to it. We're building something new. A society that celebrates diversity instead of fearing it." "Show them," Finn suggested. Rala nodded, activating the station's holographic systems. Images filled the hall, their outposts where Nexary of all sizes lived and worked together, human scientists collaborating with Nexary engineers, new technologies born from the merger of ancient wisdom and modern innovation. "This is what becomes possible," Rala said, "when we stop trying to force everyone into the same mold. Look at what we've achieved in just 6 months." "And what of the dangers?" one council member asked. "The wars that once plagued our people." "Those wars happened because you tried to suppress difference," Finn interjected. "You can't eliminate diversity, it's the natural state of all living things. But you can learn to embrace it, to find strength in it." The negotiations lasted days. In the end, they reached an agreement. The exile decree would be lifted. Those who wished to return home could do so without being forced to change. The Star Wanderers would maintain their independence but establish diplomatic relations with Nexary society. "It's not perfect," Finn said later, as they watched the Council ships depart. "But it's a start." "A bridge between worlds," Rala agreed. "Speaking of which." She turned to him, suddenly seeming almost shy despite her massive size. "There's something I want to show you." She led him to a part of the station they'd been renovating. The doors opened to reveal a space that took his breath away. It was a perfect blend of human and Nexary architecture, areas scaled for both their sizes, but flowing together seamlessly. A home built for two very different beings. "I thought," Rala said softly, "since we've been so busy building bridges for everyone else." Finn's heart swelled. "It's perfect," he said, reaching up to take her massive hand in his small one. "Just like us." Their journey had started with a crash landing and a hidden cave. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, a movement, a revolution, a home among the stars. But most importantly, it had given two outcasts something they'd both been searching for, someone who saw their differences not as flaws, but as the very things that made them perfect for each other. As they stood together in their new home, watching the stars whirl past the viewport, Finn smiled. Sometimes the greatest discoveries weren't the ones you went looking for. Sometimes they found you, 14 feet tall and with eyes like starlight, in a crystal canyon at the edge of known space. And sometimes, just sometimes, a bridge between hearts could change entire worlds.